right now. Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome inside the Fan Cave. This is the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. I'm here. Chris Mueller is there, which is 93.7 The Fan, home of the PM team. I'm sure it was a busy day today. I want to start by giving just a happy birthday to the king of golf, Arnold Palmer. This would have been number 95. He was born on September the 10th. And what an amazing human being, and always like to acknowledge that because long live the king, as I like to say. Chris, that guy was just unbelievable when it came to not only being a great ambassador for the sport, but for this region as well.
Larger than life when he was alive and in the game, and while Tiger Woods might be maybe responsible for the explosion of money into golf in the last 30 years, I think Arnold Palmer walked so Tiger Woods could run as far as popularity, making it a sport of the people. So yes, happy birthday indeed to a nothing less than a legend. Legend gets thrown around a lot, does it not, Bob?
Yes.
And in this case, it might not even be a strong enough word in the Western Pennsylvania sports community.
No question about that. All right, let's talk about another legend. That would be Andrew McCutchen, because he had number 20 tonight. And before I get into the Steeler talk, just want to acknowledge what he's been able to do in his last 13 games. It's ridiculous, 19 runs batted in. And I wonder now, there are a lot of people who thought that maybe Andrew McCutchen shouldn't come back for one more year. I think that probably is no longer the case. But the question is, how much money? I mean, there may be a market for him besides Pittsburgh. I know he wants to stay here, but it's a very interesting situation. Would you agree?
I guess I wouldn't agree, because I think he really does want to stay here to such a degree that he just is going to probably take the same deal that he had this year. I think he's happy to play for like a modest amount of money here. It's the rare situation where it just seems like the player really wants to be in Pittsburgh. And in their case, they are lucky. I know September baseball, people say don't put a ton of stock into it, especially for teams who are out of the race, but he's really been a steady offensive producer who's shown real pop in his bat for the majority of the year. And I will, Bob, just count myself among the people who owe him a bit of a mea culpa and need to eat a little bit of crow, because I would say for the first 3 weeks or so of the season, it looked like he was done. Like really, it looked bad. Maybe the first month plus. But he got himself together, and he has started hitting the ball out of the ballpark. And let's be honest, for the money I think he'll command from them, or that he would require, he is as good as they are going to do as far as a DH. A guy who hits the ball over the fence 20 times can't be ignored. That is not something that you should just throw out with the trash. Let's put it that way.
And it might be interesting. He says, you know what, based on the numbers, I should get double what I'm paying. I'd be interested to see how that works in the offseason. And he'd have a right to expect it. Let's talk about the Steelers now. Mike Tomlin met today and basically said that Justin Fields is going to operate as the quarterback for now leading into the week, but he didn't rule out Russell Wilson as he goes through practice this week. He's still dealing with whatever injury he's dealing with that calf. But it's very interesting to me that because I thought today it would just be, let practice be our guide. We'll see how it goes with no declaration one way or the other. But he pretty much said we're going to ride with Justin Fields for now. What's your take on what he said, how he said it, and what do you think will ultimately happen here eventually when, Russell Wilson is healthy?
Well, he didn't actually declare Fields the starter, as you pointed out, but don't let that stop a breathless national media who has been begging for Justin Fields to be the starter before Russell Wilson re-aggravated the calf and everything else. They are running with this one. Justin Fields named the start. No, he wasn't. I think he is going to start, however, because, and this is, Bob, where I come down on this, I think it's a very delicate situation. Wilson, part of the reason he signed here was yes, opportunity, but also he wanted a chance to stick it to Sean Payton. Week 2 was Russell Wilson's Super Bowl of sorts. He felt like he was good enough to go in the Falcons game, and the doctors and the team decided otherwise. I doubt that Mike Tomlin and the rest of the Steelers brass were very happy that Wilson's camp put that part of the story out there in Atlanta and gave their side of it. If you don't play him in this game, I think you risk really alienating the player here, but yet Mike Tomlin has to win football games, especially with the back half of the schedule shaping up the way it does. Here's ultimately, though, my it's not the ace in the hole for Tomlin. It's not something he can fall back on necessarily because Wilson will still be mad. I, Bob, do not believe Russell Wilson is really close to 100% right now. Christian McCaffrey, who is younger and in better shape than Wilson, has been dealing with a calf injury for weeks, also with some Achilles tendonitis. We have seen Joe Burrow nurse a calf injury similar to Wilson's for many, many, many weeks as well. There is a correlation, some think, between calf injuries and your Achilles going pop. I just do not believe that Russell Wilson, given all that we know and given his age, is that close to playing. I think that's the bottom line here. I think if he went out there, he would be compromised, and I think that's going to ultimately allow Mike Tomlin to just roll with Justin Fields with a clear conscience.
And I think that's exactly the case. I do. And we saw today that McCaffrey in San Francisco may not play for a while now with the same exact kind of injury. And good for them. They have Jordan Mason, who last night ripped it up to the tune of 147 yards, a former undrafted guy. So San Francisco keeps finding players. But I think that's exactly the way it is. I think there's still a lingering part of this injury. He doesn't want him to go out there, and if he's not 100%, especially in a game that I think you have to win, given their schedule coming up. So we'll talk more about that. We invite you to call us at 412-575-2600. This is the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. We are live on KDKA Plus until 11 o'clock. GMC Sierra tweet of the night comes from Alex Stump, MLB.com. And Pirates who've hit 20 home runs plus in the age of 37 or older, Willie Stargell and now Andrew McCutchen. Stargell did it twice. He's also getting closer to Roberto Clemente's Pirate mark for home runs in a career. You know, Andrew, Andrew McCutchen.
Why are you calling me Andrew Filipponi, Bob?
Andrew McCutchen. Anyway, Chris, about Andrew McCutchen, I think, you know, if this continues, let's say next year he has another similar kind of year. I don't know if he will or won't. I doubted, like you, at the beginning of the season he could. I mean, he's carving out a Hall of Fame career here, don't you think? I mean, he's getting closer to that.
Here's where I express my first unpopular opinion of the night. As far as the eye test goes, his best was Hall of Fame good, but it wasn't Hall of Fame good for long enough, at least in the way I look at Hall of Famers. Even if he hangs on next year for another 20 home run season, he's not going to be that close to 3,000 hits. He's going to have an MVP. He's going to have a nice long career, but as much as he is an iconic Pittsburgh Pirate and easily an all-time franchise great and a hugely meaningful player in the franchise's history, he is not what I think of when I think of a Hall of Famer. Like, at no point was he the best player in baseball for even 1 year of his career. He overlaps with Mike Trout, overlaps with Shohei Ohtani, guys like that. I just can't put him in that strata.
Well, I think he's getting closer to it. I don't know if I can either, but I think he's building it toward that direction. We'll see how it goes. But I do think he will come back, but I do think he's going to probably want a little bit more cash. And I wouldn't blame him for asking, just to see where that would go. Anyway, let's get back to what we've seen. You know, last night I was anxiously watching the 49ers and the Jets, and watching because I wanted to see Aaron Rodgers, who made a beautiful pass for a touchdown on a free play. But I also saw a lot of what I saw with Kirk Cousins. That is a surgical procedure that made, I think, the quarterback seem a little tentative. Did you see that as well? I know San Francisco's loaded. It's my pick to get to the Super Bowl and win. But you know, what did you see from him? And do you think they're in a better position, the Jets, to compete in that division if this is what we see from Aaron Rodgers, or how much better can he be?
So I don't think this is what we're going to see from him all year. I do think he needed to go out there and actually get hit. I thought he tried to move around at least a little bit more than Cousins did. He's always been a more mobile player than Cousins. Bob, I chalk a lot of that up to that is just a ridiculously loaded football team that they went against. I really think, honest to God, I think there is one team in the NFC that can go toe-to-toe with them, and it's the team that let them off the hook last year in the AFC title game. That's Detroit. I think those are two, clearly the class of that conference. The Jets, for me, are probably like a 7th or 8th in the AFC team, so right on the edge of the wild card. I think you saw, though, with Rodgers, I don't know about you, like I did see still the processing. When he had a clean pocket, he's rifling throws to Garrett Wilson that Zach Wilson probably wouldn't even attempt. Like there are just things that he still, even at 40 years old, he sees that the guys they've had to roster at that position when he was out last year just aren't even capable of thinking of, let alone executing. And so I think as long as he is feeling confidence in that Achilles, they're going to be a tough out, because I still think their defense is pretty good.
Yeah, it is, but last night you would never have known just because San Francisco is that loaded. That included a drop touchdown pass from Brandon Ayuk. Back to the Steelers. I wanted to get to the game plan that we saw in Atlanta was effective. It was the way they needed to play it. Now you would like more than no touchdowns. You got Chris Boswell, which is interesting in Denver. I wonder how long his range would be. But there's got to be an evolution to this if it's going to be Fields this week and even beyond. So what do you think has to happen next? Because it can't win with this, and Denver's not a good team, but against some of the elite teams that you will see in the future, you better be able to score points and match them point for point.
So I thought one notable thing was the Justin Fields pass chart, which was there were no throws.
It was
none
a Pickett. It was
whatsoever.
a Kenny Pickett pass chart.
It was.
Same.
I think I saw somebody tweet something like, it looks like the chart of a pitcher who's getting sent to the minors because he can't find the plate because there's nothing over the middle. It was completely outside the hash marks. Now, Fields is such a gifted runner and such a great athlete and has such a rocket arm that he is capable of making more out of that kind of a game plan than Pickett was. Like, Kenny just doesn't have the throw the way Fields made it at the end of the first half to Pickens that set them up for that field goal. Kenny did have the drop in the bucket kind of throw that Fields also made down the sideline that got called back, but I look at this, you say like the game plan has to evolve and change, especially if Fields is in there. It doesn't have to this week. You know Mike Tomlin better than I do, and you know that while fans might not look at a game like the Atlanta game and particularly be happy with the offensive output, for him that's practically a Rembrandt, isn't it? I mean, he loves games where he can slop it up against a supposedly better offensive opponent and win that way, but they're going to have to test the middle of the field eventually against better competition, and they're probably going to have more designed deep shots for Fields to take. And that means probably figuring out a way to make sure that double coverage, Bob, isn't following George Pickens around on every play.
Right. And I think, again, going back to the San Francisco game, watching Kyle Juszczyk go down the sidelines, 30 yards down the field, they come up with ways that they get everyone involved, especially over the middle, and using people that you wouldn't have expected to be involved that deep in a passing game. So, against Denver, you could win the same way. And I would also think that Denver's got to watch because now you're going to have a young quarterback who didn't look particularly sharp last week go against this defense, which is healthy right now. And when it's healthy, it can do a lot of different stuff. I wonder how much they will blitz versus what they did against Cousins because they knew Cousins was a sitting duck. How much do you think they will do to kind of rattle him, but you run the risk of also allowing him to escape?
I think they're going to try to play a little bit conservatively. I also would be stunned if even a guy as arrogant, and I think he is very arrogant, Sean Payton, tries to throw the ball 42 times, I think. Yeah. It was like 42 attempts and 138 yards or less. There's only 3 guys in NFL history with that putrid of a stat line. Bo Nix. Remember Jesse Palmer? I think he hosts The Bachelor now or something.
Yeah, he's a good host.
And then unfortunately, 40-year-old Ben Roethlisberger is another one during the true dink and dunk era that we had to sit through at the end of his career. So I think the Broncos are going to run the ball a little bit more or maybe a lot more than they did. But to go back to, you mentioned Purdy here. I just want to drive home a point, Bob, that I think is important to note because I understand why everyone's tantalized by Fields' athleticism. Brock Purdy, as far as using all of the field, he doesn't have the arm and he doesn't have the legs, certainly, of Fields. But in terms of anticipatory throws, Brock Purdy uses the middle of the field way better than probably Justin Fields ever will because he sees things before they happen, and he's able to put the ball in spots before the receiver gets there. I mean, that's quarterbacking like grad level, 500 level stuff that he does as a former Mr. Irrelevant. And I know people want to believe that can come along in the Steelers offense, but I think it's only going to come along to a point, and it's never going to look like San Francisco's offense.
No,
never.
I don't think so. And he runs it well. And those, for a lot of he's a system quarterback. Yeah, he is, maybe, but he's also somebody who can identify things and go to the correct read and he looks over the field very well. So I give him a lot of credit for where he was drafted, where he's end up, and where he's going to cash in next year because they got to probably come up with a lot of money.
The ball to Ayuk was a phenomenal ball. Right. I think that is that's like a 12 out of 10 throw by a quarterback. It's a shame Ayuk dropped it, especially for my fantasy team.
Yeah, he laid out, but it was right in his hands too. He had to make that play, and he didn't. So that's what happens when you don't do anything for a while. Maybe he was a little bit rusty. We got to take a break here. We'll do it. Come back with more. It's the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. We're on 7 nights a week right here on KDKA+ and most nights 93.7 The Fan. One of the bigger stories this week was that Pitt has moved on from Heather Lyke as athletic director. And Chris, you weren't on here last night, so I didn't get a chance to ask you about it. But I wasn't surprised given stuff that I had heard about it. End of a contract. She's been interviewing at a lot of different places. So, and maybe if it was Pat Gallagher still, because he hired her and they had a better relationship than Joan Gable does. But I'm just curious your thoughts about why. Because to me, it's mostly fundraising and NIL more than anything else, but why you think it happened and where do they go from here?
So I think there's a couple of quick things here I would say, Bob. If you're a fan of the Olympic sports, you would be a bit crestfallen that Heather was let go because she did a lot for women's volleyball in particular, soccer, wrestling. We know all about that. The Victory Heights project, which is supposed to move so many of these programs, none of which notably are football and basketball, which is kind of the other part of this story, into more modern facilities. It's way behind on its fundraising. Pitt would have to eat all that money. So I think Heather did some good things for some sports that are often ignored, but the problem is football's still the king moneymaker, and then men's basketball follows suit. And ultimately, she came along at a time where they were kind of in a period of transition. She definitely didn't have, it seems like, the NIL fundraising pipeline set up. The Victory Heights project, like I said, was behind as far as its fundraising. Bottom line is, in that line of work, Bob, you got to be able to do two things. You've got to be able to be a good business person and really make sure that certain deals go off correctly, and you've got to be able to fundraise. And it doesn't seem like at the end of the day Heather was doing either one of those well enough to keep her job, particularly as you mentioned with a chancellor she did not have the same kind of relationship with.
All right, that brings us to Pitt in West Virginia now, because I was listening to Neil Brown. He was talking today about, actually yesterday, about how to stop Pitt's offense. Well, Pitt's offense last week for 3 quarters didn't do much of anything, and all of a sudden I thought Cincinnati contributed, taking nothing away from this comeback, which was one of the best in 50 years. But still, Cincinnati played right into their hands, I thought. However, Desmond Reed is a real deal. I mean, he did something that we saw last week we hadn't seen at all in the history of that program, 100 rushing yards and then 100 yards on the receiving side of it. How do you see this one going down?
Can Pitt handle prosperity? 4 words. We'd all love to know the answer. Can Pitt handle prosperity? I would love to believe that they can. I would love to believe that they're going to win this game, beat Youngstown State, and go 4-0 in their non-conference for the first time ever. Literally, like first time that they would have done that. Right now, I can't commit to it, Bob. I feel like you can't get away, even though West Virginia is not like some great team, you can't get away with playing 3 bad quarters and 1 great quarter and beat them, even though the game is at Acrisure Stadium. So right now, I think Pitt would cover in this game, but I don't know about you, I just have such a hard time picking them to just handle their business when they're riding a high and everyone's expecting them to.
Yeah, again, you got to show it to me before I believe it. And until they do that, I think a lot of people have that same opinion. Chris, we're out of time. Thanks as always. Appreciate it. Are you on tomorrow night or not?
Tomorrow night and the night after, a three-peat, a 3-pack of Mulsey.
All right. Good night, Chris, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow night.